Well, hello there.
It's enough of that. Well, hello there. The biggest, I think, problem that a lot of people have with the Idaho student murders is this. Law enforcement. And that's the video over with. Have a fantastic day. No, I'm only joking. Yeah, law enforcement. Are law enforcement handling this case correctly? We're down a track. Seemingly, we don't seem to have gotten very far. We see that the families of the victims are becoming more and more frustrated as time comes on. And it gets to a point where you start to lose a little bit of faith and question, have they got this? Have they truly got this? Or are they out of their depth? And it's a hard one because you're caught between, you understand that they obviously want to protect the integrity of the investigation, and we, the public, are not obligated, or they're not obligated to tell us anything that could affect the integrity of the investigation. But then you listen to information that they do put out and the way that they do handle things, and sometimes you find yourself very frustrated because when you pair that with the frustration of the family that you're seeing publicly, then it exacerbates that feeling of uncertainty in whether they do indeed have this or not. So, do law enforcement have this? I'm not 100% sure whatsoever. Now, someone emailed me because I'd done this video about the people who had been cleared, and, they'd cleared them far too early. And this person quite rightfully said, if you listen to law enforcement, they don't use the terminology, we have cleared these people. They say it in a different way, and their media will get a hold of it. They will say that these individuals have been cleared, and then social media will run with it. And I kind of went back and I said, the issue that you have is that law enforcement should know how the things that they put out can be interpreted by people. And when you say certain things, it looks like you are saying something without saying it. So if they turn around and say that the remaining housemates are not involved, we do not believe that they are involved in what happened. We've spoken to them, and, we don't see that they're involved. Same as with the ex and the hoodie guy at the the food truck. And, people will automatically think, well, okay, then they've been cleared. And, my mind goes to, where should this case be at this stage? Who should law enforcement be focusing on? And I feel that when this case happened, this is what should have happened. And that is that the remaining housemates should have been prime suspects. Anybody who had a relationship with these girls, whether it be ex-boyfriends or actual partners now, they should have been as well. And anybody who was known to have had an altercation or an interaction in the time leading up to the murders, irrespective of anything else. And there should have been a team that was put on these people to exhaust every single avenue and deal with that. And if you don't have the manpower and the resources to do this while simultaneously looking on the peripheral, then you obtain help and assistance to do this. But these people who are the closest to the victims should automatically, in my opinion, be at the forefront of the investigation, because there are so many questions around these people. And the downside is, in this area, the majority of the people around this area seem weird as fuck. And that's the downside. You've got Jeremy, who, bless him, look, he comes across as an oddball. You've got and Harsh, again, who comes across as a fucking oddball. You've got the social media accounts of multiple people who we've all spoken about and had a look at behind the scenes and connections to other things, and they could all be considered as a viable suspect. And I'm not saying that's rightly so. I'm just saying that's factually so, that they all look weird and strange in their own unique way. But let's get to the meat and potatoes of this whole thing, and that is that they were murdered. Someone got in their home and murdered all of them. And there were people who were in the house at the time who didn't see anything, didn't hear anything, and they survived it. The person got in to a house that seemingly was prepared for them because they didn't have to break in, they walked in. And the rooms that seemingly had the ability to be individually locked were not so. We also have the situation with the 911 call, which that raises some questions. I haven't spoken about this for a while because I've been pondering over it. Because I appreciate that the surviving people, the surviving members of this group are under a lot of emotional stress right now. And I certainly don't want to add to that. But equally, you get to a point where questions do have to be asked. And I think to myself, thinking if the 911 scenario is correct. So they wake up at whatever time. There's no clarity on that. They wake up, they come across this scene that then shocks them to their core. They manage to pick up the phone, or one of them picks up the phone, dials 911 and runs outside. They then pass out in the street. So they've managed to see what they've seen, make a decision to get the phone, call 911, run outside, make a scene, collapse in front of people. There just happens to be people about. They see this. The second person also runs out, is frantic, which you can, on one side you can say, I can see why you'd be frantic, but then on the other hand, I think, does this make 100% sense? Does it? I've never been in the situation, so I don't know. It could well be. But there's something about that scenario, if that's the way this played out, that raises questions. It's almost as if this was deliberately staged to bring attention. So somebody else could come in and explain, well, it couldn't be these. These girls were clearly, they were shaken, they were distressed, they were distraught. One of them had collapsed, had passed out with what they'd seen. But let's not forget that this was around, when the call was made, the 911 call, this was around 11:30 a.m. to 12, I think. I could be wrong, but that's what I've been led to believe. So what time did they get up? When we also hear in the background that they supposedly had heard something and had locked their rooms because they'd heard something and thought that, do you know what I mean? There's a lot of things in the background that you think to yourself, some of this just doesn't make sense. And that story, when you connect it to the fact that 4 people in that house was stabbed to death, how would you not consider that there's elements to that story that raises eyebrows? And then you've got like the aforementioned ex-partners and so on and so forth, and their connections and their connections to things that are odd, like accounts that look at murder robots and stuff like that. But look, let's have a look. So this is one of the family. This is the mother of Kaylee, and she's upset. The mother of one of the 4 students killed near the University of Idaho last month expressed frustration over police communications on the status of the investigation into the murder. It's sleepless nights. It's feeling sick to your stomach. It's just being left in the dark. Kaylee Goncalves, the mother of 21-year-old victim Kaylee Goncalves, said in an interview aired on NBC's Today Show Thursday. Goncalves recounted the day she learned something had happened to her daughter. We run around for hours just not knowing what was going on. What happened, she explained. We found out by people calling us, and the sheriff showed up about 3 hours later. Shannon Gray, an attorney for Goncalves, met earlier this week with the Moscow Police Department said investigators had done a poor job communicating with the families. Now, this, I won't read it word for word. I want you to get a feel for it. Because what she goes on to say in this is it's even about the injuries that were sustained by some of these victims Kaylee had, sustained. That it was people who had reached out from a professional capacity and given them information. They then learned that these people had gone on and done interviews out in the public eye. And, they're learning things secondhand. You think, what are law enforcement doing? Why are they not keeping the family updated with what is going on, what is being said, what is not being said, what they know, what they don't know, the car situation? Why weren't the families approached and said, look, we've seen this car has been brought to our attention. Do you guys know whether one of their friends or someone they knew had this vehicle? Because surely that would be one of the first things you do to rule out this car, to go to the families and see whether the car is even known to them, not for the families to find out that law enforcement are looking for a car through media outlets and things like that. Surely the first people to learn anything should be the families. You go to the families first, you explain where you are, what you found, what you're going to be doing, and do it. And it just doesn't seem to me like law enforcement are doing that. Now, I'm trying to work out whether they're understaffed, they're under the cosh, they don't know what they're doing, they're inexperienced, they haven't handled anything like this, and they're struggling to do so. But they've got to get a grip on this. They've got to get a grip on it, because what is the killer going to be thinking? There's a killer out there. There's someone who did this, and they're going to be watching. They could be closer than anybody imagines, but they're seeing this. And what are they going to be thinking about it? Law enforcement needs to be giving either no information out whatsoever and keeping tight-lipped on anything and speaking to the families fully so the families know what is going on, so the families themselves aren't coming out and having to address that this isn't being dealt with properly and how they feel about it. Because I feel that this is getting more and more dangerous as law enforcement are making themselves look incompetent. What that's going to do to the confidence of a would-be killer and has-been killer. Could they do it again because they think that they're... I just don't know. Are we seeing actual ineptitude or a law enforcement agency trying to give the impression of it? Let me know down below, and I'll catch you in the next one.